Table centres are an important addition for any function. This gerbera has a wire support for manipulation. It's a green painted wire. The parafilm being wound around the stem fastens the wire, but it is optional and it needs to be camouflaged by foliage. The tilting of the head is made possible by that wire support. In preparation of the roses, to clean the stems use either a rose stripper, see that application, or a knife. Be careful not to damage the outer fibres of the rose stem, as the air will get in and dry and harm the lifespan of the rose. This is a very brightly coloured container. A third of a brick of floral foam has been inserted, and that has been fastened across the centre with pot tape. The gerberas are being sized. We're looking to start with the smaller of the gerberas, and we're going to work in towards the larger. Again, you can see the manipulation with that wire support allowing us to angle the flower down, tilt the head slightly to the table. This particular shape of table centre would be suited to either a rectangular or elongated table rather than a rounded table. Starting each end, you gain your perspectives of size and where they're going to work a focal line, that's your predominant, outstanding line, right up step by step, where the two extensions will meet at a central point, a central flower, which becomes the focal flower. That's that one right now. The head looks up. It's very important that that is vertical. And now we're linking the line, as you can see, forming a nice stepping formation. The distance between the flowers should be approximately equal. Tilting of that head, see that angling, very important that it looks upwards. When you insert into the foam, cut on a good sharp angle and insert sufficiently so that the stems are beneath the waterline. It's a reinforcement of the stepping. Now we're going to work in between with the roses. The focal gerbera is still the highest, and you have a nice guide working in between, again working larger down to smaller. The rose leaves have been left on the roses. Make sure they're not in the way when you insert into the foam. To see the rose was being cleaned there of any imperfect petals. Always check this. So the rose leaves are actually giving more foliage as filler into the construction. That rose was too long, shorten it, because again we don't want it to be higher than that focal gerbera. So the spacing between the gerberas is fairly even, and we wish to achieve the same with the roses. There's your dimensional pattern. It's extremely important when you plan a table centre that you do consider the height level of the centre. This one is very high, and to see the person on the other side of the table when they're seated is always a consideration. Any higher than this and you could be blocking conversation viewing from one side to the other side of the table. You can of course go lower. That's not a problem. You can extend out wider, you can give more length and have less dimension, and they're all options that are open to you depending on the size of the table and the flowers that you're using. The side extensions have now been placed, and this gives the guide. As you can see, following the shape and dimension, it's the same as the extensions, but a shorter version across the width. Fairly even placement. Almost, if you were looking at this from an aerial view, in a cross shape. Flowers are being extended in this in-between area between the side and the end of the focal line. So you have stepping coming right down to the base level. So from the focal bloom, the next layer, the base layer, the widest section at the side and then contouring back in, and that will be the same on each side. The shape is definitely coming into play. I've just used a rose stem with foliage as a filler. If you intend to do this, make sure that you do cut the top of the stem away, right down to the very fork where the first leaf appears. The colour distribution is important. You've got a yellow gold rose and more of a lemon in the gerbras. If it was all gold, then we would have a monochromatic harmony. Because we have the lemon, which is derived from yellow, and then the gold, which is a yellow-orange, we have a dyadic harmony. The colour blue in the container doesn't fit into that harmony, but that would probably be a feature in the room that you were trying to complement, or in fact it could be that the bridesmaids were wearing this colour blue and carrying these colour flowers for a wedding, and that would be the reason for your choice. This is variegated box that's being added. As you can see, the texture and colours are ideal for the flowers that we're using. The roses could be slightly more open. If this was being made the day before the function, we would be allowing for them to open a little more overnight. Always make sure that you do add water to the container. Clean away any excess leaves from the end of the stem so that you are always inserting just the stem without the foliage coming in contact with the foam. If you didn't clean away, you'd insert a much larger hole, and therefore, if you kept doing this, you are in danger of collapsing the foam. There you see that cleaning away and the insertion into the container. If you continue with your placement of the variegated box, distributing throughout the arrangement, you'll find that the texture and the colour combination will perfectly distribute itself right throughout the table centre. If you wanted to create a much more dramatic effect that was less traditional, you could actually use different types of foliages and group them in specific areas of the table centre. So you may have the box in 1/4 of the design. You might decide to use Spengia asparagus in another quarter of the design, saxifrage in another section, and perhaps a maple in the final section. You'd need to look at the balances of the weight of the foliages if you did this, and this would be referred to as grouping. And that can look very interesting. The box is going into the higher sections underneath the focal bloom, and the table centre is really taking on an interesting shape. It's a good idea to have an overview, look down on the table centre, and that helps you to gain your perspective from the central point, looking right down each side. Sometimes you can even put this on the floor just as a final check, just to make sure that your shape is really thorough. There's a usage of the foliage, the rose leaves, going in with the stem, so the leaves are receiving the moisture. Placed, the box brought back over, so that it all looks like it's almost growing in a formation, even though it's very formal. Internal wiring is another method of support for gerbras, because they're hollow-stemmed. Use either black or silver wire rather than painted wire, because painted wire is more expensive to purchase. These are the final touches to the table centre. Clean off the bench for your perspectives. Remember, don't work in mess. You always need to see clearly what you're doing. Tilting that head down, checking the dimension, turning the table centre, side dimension, good distribution of sizes and colours, light mist of water, always makes the flowers look nice and fresh. and this one's ready for the function. Make sure when it is positioned on the table, it is placed in the centre. Very final additions, so we have the balance flowing through. See, I'm looking at this to check over any final areas. There's an aerial view of the completed table centre. Using the same construction method, we have a much larger, more elaborate table centre. This one is nearly 2 metres in length, with very large headed roses. If you follow the shadow forward, this could be extended out to form a forward cascade.